The fluorescent hummed. It appeared as a sickly yellow halo above Edward's head as he wiped down the counter. For the fourth night in a row, the final tally had been $10 short. The first time, he had blamed himself, attributing the discrepancy to exhaustion. The second time, he had been meticulous, double-checking the starting float. When the $10 vanished again, a cold knot of dread began to tighten in his stomach. He pressed the intercom button, the plastic worn smooth under his thumb. A low crackle preceded Carl's perpetually gruff voice. "Yeah, Edward?" "Another 10, Carl. Gone. I counted it 3 times tonight before opening the register for the first sale." Edward's voice, usually gravelly, was strain type. A sigh, heavy and put upon, scraped through the speaker. "Edward, are you sure you're not just, tired? Maybe you're rounding down the change? Look, I told you. Keep a better eye on the till. This is getting ridiculous." "I am not miscounting," Edward insisted, gripping the worn intercom. "It's always $10. It's too precise to be an error. Something is happening here." "Something's happening? You're sleep deprived? That's what's happening? Just finish your shift," Carl snapped. "I'm not going to entertain conspiracy theories about a missing $10. Just finish your shift." The line clicked dead. Carl's indifference stung, but it also solidified Edward's resolve. He was not crazy. The routine was too specific. He was also perturbed that Carl was not suspecting that he was guilty of keeping the $10 for himself and then reporting it for plausible deniability. He spent the next day reviewing the security footage, the grainy black and white feed of the corner store filling his tiny screen. He fast-forwarded through hours of mundane stalking and solitary breaks until he met the 3:11 a.m. timestamp. He watched his own figure behind the counter, looking utterly exhausted. Then 3:12 a.m., the screen flickered, a brief burst of static, then a swirling shadow, not quite solid, not quite smoke, coalesced directly behind him. It had no discernible features, yet it radiated an unnatural coldness that seemed to bleed through the monitor. Edward watched his on-screen self sag instantly, an unconscious weight slumping forward, his head hitting the counter with a soft thud. The shadow moved with unnatural speed. A tendril, like an elongated finger of pure night, reached into the open cash drawer. It retrieved a single $10 bill. The entire process from manifestation to disappearance took exactly 6 seconds. Then the shadow vanished, the static cutting out, and the on-screen Edward jolted awake, looking around blearily, convinced he'd just momentarily dozed off. Edward replayed the 6 seconds over and over, his breath catching in his throat. It was not a thief. It was a specter, a thing of darkness, and it rendered him unconscious every night at precisely 3:12 a.m. to steal $10. Tonight, he wasn't just going to watch. Tonight, he would outsmart the shadow, or whatever dark forces are at play. Edward pulled out a crisp $10 bill from his own wallet, its edges sharp against his thumb. He then clutched it tightly in his hand, ready. The clock on the wall crept towards 3:11 a.m. The air grew heavy, thick with a nauseating metallic scent. He could feel the pressure building, the silent anticipation of the spectral arrival. Digits on the clock flicked 3:12 a.m. A cold breath ghosted his neck. The shadow, a swirling vortex of deep indigo and black, formed behind him, larger tonight, more defined, its edges shimmering with a faint, almost imperceptible red. A tendril, heavy with dark intent, reached for his head. Edward's phone alarm blared. A shrill command violently piercing straight into his mind to wake up. 6 seconds. The voice in his mind stated firmly. He snapped his eyes open, slammed his own $10 bill into the open cash drawer, right where the other had been taken seconds before. The shadow recoiled instantly. It shrieked, a sound like tearing silk, a high-pitched, grinding keen that grated against his very bones. The air crackled, smelling of ozone and burnt sugar. The tendril failed to take Edward's consciousness, lashed out, not at him, but at the register itself. The drawers flew open violently, coins scattering across the floor with metallic clatter, 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 clatter. The shadow began to unravel, its form rippling, stretching, a tortured, voiceless scream echoing in the small store as it tore itself apart. It wasn't just dissipating. It was imploding, a silent vortex of dark energy collapsing inward. A final guttural wail, impossibly loud inside his head, then silence. The air cleared, leaving only the mundane hum of the refrigerator. He stood trembling, the scent of something metallic like old blood lingering. The register lay askew, content strewn, creating a mosaic across the tiles. He stared at his own $10 bill, now nestled amongst the other bills in the drawer. He had put it back. The next morning, the local news channels blared. Carl, owner of Carl's Corner Stop, was found dead in his home. His face was frozen in a rictus of horror, the official report citing a sudden, massive stroke. Edward saw the close-up photo of the single item found clutched in Carl's hand, a crumpled, singed $10 bill. Then he knew, the shadow, the 3:12 a.m. ritual, the $10. It all suddenly made sense. The universe, it seemed, had a brutal way of balancing the books when integrity is defied. "Are you sure about this, Sarah?" Saul's voice, a smooth blend of concern and practiced charm, purred through the phone. He had materialized in her life like a mirage, a financial advisor, he claimed, referred by a mutual acquaintance she couldn't quite place. He had an answer for everything, a solution for every nascent fear. These things can be complicated. Protecting your assets, ensuring long-term growth. It's not just about the money, it's about your future. A week prior, lawyers got in touch with Sarah, their voices hushed, almost reverent, as they informed Sarah of her grandmother's passing. Alara, a woman Sarah barely knew, a recluse rumored to speak to crows and grow roses that bloomed black in winter. That same woman left Sarah everything, a substantial sum, the notary had called it, life-changing. Despite all that Saul proposed, Sarah expressed a desire to do some good with her newfound wealth. Still, Saul found a charity for her. Orphans of the Obsidian Star. They help children who've lost everything. Sarah was shown the charity's website, glowing with images of smiling children, their eyes wide and hopeful. Saul had found it for her, and he'd vetted it, he'd said, thoroughly. The transfer went through with a few clicks. A dizzying sum, the notary's words echoing, life-changing. Sarah felt a rush, not of loss, but of purpose. She had done something good. She had honored Alara's memory, even if Alara herself had been a mystery. Days later, the call started. Not from the charity, but from Saul. His voice, once so reassuring, now held a frantic edge. "Sarah, pick up. It's urgent." The voicemail was riddled with static, his tone strained. Another message, hours later, his breathing ragged. "Something's happening. I don't feel well." Then silence. Sarah tried calling him back. No answer. She emailed. Nothing. A prickle of unease, cold and sharp, began to spread through her. She called the charity, her fingers trembling. The number was disconnected. The website, a shimmering beacon of hope just days ago, now displayed a stark, unmoving error message. A week passed. The news report was brief, tucked away in an obscure local newspaper. A man identified as Saul Vance found dead in his apartment. No signs of forced entry, no obvious cause of death. The coroner listed it as acute organ failure, a medical anomaly that baffled the authorities. Sarah remembered Alara's house, the one she'd never visited. This time she felt she needed to visit for answers. A small, unassuming cottage on the outskirts of town, now hers. She drove there, the suburban streets giving way to overgrown lanes. the air growing thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic like old blood. The front door, painted a deep, almost black green, stood ajar. Inside, dust motes danced in the slivers of light piercing the drawn curtains. The air was heavy, stagnant, as if time itself had paused within these walls. A single gnarled rosebush, its petals the color of dried blood, clawed at the window pane. In the living room, a large leather-bound book lay open on a rickety wooden table. Its pages, yellowed with age, were filled with looping script and strange, intricate symbols. Sarah's eyes scanned the text, her breath catching. A language she didn't understand, yet something about it resonated, a deep, unsettling hum beneath her skin. She turned a page. A crudely drawn diagram depicted a series of concentric circles, radiating from a central point. Around the circles, a familiar name, Alara, and below it, a line of text, translated into English in a smaller, neater hand, the blood price for stolen generosity. Sarah's gaze darted to the next page. Another diagram, even more disturbing. A figure, human-like, contorted in agony. A list of internal organs written neatly, then subsequently crossed out, sits beside the image. Beneath it, a single stark sentence. The usurper of the benevolent gift shall forfeit their own essence. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The words, the diagrams, the chilling coincidence of Saul's death. It couldn't be. Her grandmother, a witch? The thought was absurd, a relic of fairy tales. Yet the air in the room felt colder, heavier. She turned one last page. A photograph, brittle with age, slipped from between the leaves. It showed a young Alara, her eyes sharp and knowing, standing beside a woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to Sarah herself. In her grandmother's hand, a small silver locket. The same locket Sarah now wore around her neck. A chill, far deeper than the house's stagnant air, seeped into Sarah's bones. The locket pulsed faintly against her skin. She remembered Saul's smooth words, the easy way he'd convinced her. His death, sudden and inexplicable. The charity, a phantom. She looked at the book again, at the words. The blood price for stolen generosity. Alara hadn't just left her money. She had left her protection. And Saul, and his greed, had stepped directly into its path. A low creak echoed from the hallway. Sarah spun around, her eyes wide, searching the dimness. Nothing, only the shadows, stretching and twisting in the corners of the room. The house, once merely old, now felt alive, watching. The unsettling truth unfurled within her. Her inheritance was not just money. It was a legacy, ancient and dangerous, woven with threads of magic and a fierce, uncompromising justice. And she, naive Sarah, was now its keeper. The knowledge settled in her like a cold, heavy stone, the realization that some debts were paid in blood, and some virtues, like integrity, were guarded by forces beyond human comprehension. The silence of the house pressed in. The black roses outside seemed to bloom a little darker. Sarah reached for the book. The scent of stale cigarettes and cheap perfume clung to Cynthia like a second skin, a testament to endless nights and endless rooms. As a chambermaid at the faded Grandview Hotel, her hands, calloused from scrubbing, often found their way into forgotten pockets and open jewelry boxes. Not gram larcenies, mind you, just tithes. A pair of cufflinks here, a delicate silver chain there. Small, easily dismissed treasures that nonetheless bought her a few days' grace on rent or a decent meal. She justified it, of course. The world owed her, she felt, for the endless parade of demanding guests and the gnawing ache in her own empty purse. One blustery Tuesday, while clearing out room 417, her fingers brushed against something cold and heavy beneath a loose floorboard. Not a common hiding spot, and her heart gave its usual little flutter of anticipation. She knelt, the stiff fabric of her uniform straining, and pried the board up. There, nestled in the dust and forgotten whispers of the room, lay a coin. It wasn't just any coin. It was gold, certainly, but thick, oddly shaped, and adorned with an intricate, unsettling symbol she couldn't quite decipher, a twisting knot of lines that seemed to writhe even as she stared. It felt ancient, heavy with a silent history. A shiver, not entirely from the draft, traced its way up her spine. This was no ordinary trinket. She pocketed it, the gold worm against her palm, a clandestine son. The next day, Cynthia visited every pawn shop within a 5-mile radius. Each grimy counter, each skeptical gaze, left her increasingly frustrated. Unrecognizable, one man grunted, pushing it back across the felt. Can't valuate it. Another, with eyes like chipped flint, offered, I'll give you scrap gold price, but it's probably just a fancy paperweight. But Cynthia, usually so pragmatic, found herself holding back. The coin, heavy in her pocket, pulsed with a strange allure. It hummed a silent song only she could hear, a promise of something more than just cash. She decided to keep it, for now. A foolish decision, perhaps, but one made with an almost hypnotic conviction. That was when the shift began. It started subtly. A misplaced cleaning cart, a forgotten bucket, small errors that drew the ire of her perpetually stressed supervisor. Then the real hammer fell. Mr. Henderson, a frequent guest known for his extravagant tastes, reported a missing diamond tie pin. A small item, yes, but valuable enough that it couldn't be shrugged off. The hotel management, already suspicious of a string of minor thefts, didn't hesitate. Your services are no longer required, Cynthia. The words, delivered with a chilling finality by the hotel manager, sliced through her meager sense of security. The world tilted, her stomach clenched. As she walked out, the gold coin, still in her pocket, felt like a lead weight dragging her down. The humiliation, the sudden terror of unemployment, hit her like a physical blow. She barely made it to the bus stop before a searing pain erupted in her skull. The world swam, colors blurring into an indistinct swirl. The last thing she remembered was the cold concrete rising to meet her. She awoke to the sterile scent of disinfectant and the relentless beeping of machines. A doctor, his face etched with a grave weariness, stood over her. The words he spoke were muffled, distant, yet each one landed like a stone in a still pond. Advanced stage, aggressive. Ovarian cancer. Discharged, but not really free, she stumbled out of the hospital, a ghost in a paper gown, the words echoing in her ears. The once vibrant world now seemed muted, a faded photograph. Her body, once a sturdy vessel of resilience, felt like a crumbling ruin. The bus ride home was a blur of misery. The setting sun cast long, skeletal shadows across the familiar street. Her apartment building, usually a comforting sight, now loomed like a silent judge. As she fumbled for her keys, her eyes snagged on the vibrant orange of a notice taped to her door. Eviction. The paper fluttered in the evening breeze, a cruel mockery. Rent? She hadn't paid rent. She sank to the grimy hallway floor, the cold linoleum seeping into her bones. Her world, meticulously constructed on a shaky foundation of small deceptions, had finally crumbled. The gold coin, heavy with its unspoken promise, rolled from her pocket and clinked against the floor, stopping just out of her reach. A shadow fell over her. She looked up, her eyes, swimming with tears, struggling to focus. A man stood there, tall and gaunt, his face a landscape of ancient lines and sorrowful eyes. He wore a dark, shapeless suit that seemed to absorb the fading light. He bent down, his movements unnervingly silent, and picked up the coin. His gaze, cold and knowing, met hers. The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken judgment. Some things, he said, his voice a low, raspy whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, are not meant to be taken. Not by you. Not by anyone. He held the coin aloft, the strange symbol seeming to glow faintly in his grasp. The twisting knot of lines on its surface seemed to tighten, to pull inward, as if consuming itself. A profound weariness, deeper than any she had ever known, settled over Cynthia. It wasn't just physical exhaustion. It was the weariness of a soul stripped bare. The man merely nodded, a gesture of grim finality, and then he was gone, melting into the deepening twilight. The coin, too, was gone. Cynthia was left alone, slumped against the door, the eviction notice fluttering mockingly above her head, the cold of the linoleum a stark reminder of her broken world. The weight of her choices, heavier than any gold, pressed down on her, an unyielding, suffocating presence. She closed her eyes, and the darkness that followed was absolute.